Welcome to all you storm watchers, storm chasers, and Leanierologists out there. Welcome to another edition of Tempest Talks, where we discuss lean philosophy, principles, and tools, and how they impact our personal and professional lives. Today, we will be discussing lean consulting or facilitation with my good friend, Sam Walling. By way of introduction, prior to lean, Sam's professional background included 15 years in product design and program management. In 1998, Sam was volunteered to be the lean lead at the manufacturing facility that he worked at. He has since held lean leadership positions at 3 large aerospace companies, with some consulting sprinkled in. Sam's passion at work is to mentor the next generation of lean zealots with a focus on cultural change. His passions outside of work include family, friends, spending time outdoors, home improvement, and collecting antique furniture. Sam's been married for 37 years with 2 children and 2 grandchildren. Welcome, Sam. It's so good to see you again. It's been far too long.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. Yes, it's been a while, hasn't it?
Yeah. For those of you that don't know, Sam and I used to work together at one of those aerospace companies. He was one of my lean leaders that I took a lot of information from and gleaned from. And Sam's been a great resource for me over the years. Thank you.
Always a pleasure.
So how has lean been since we've seen each other? When I say consulting or even facilitation in this case, lean from a lean perspective, what does that actually mean to you?
Well, I mean, it's a lot of things. You think about lean. Lean is a holistic approach to improving a business. So it's far more than just the kind of technical lean things like doing 5S or doing process mapping. It's working with people, working with leadership, helping people connect the dots of the world, if you will. So it's far more than just simply the technical aspects of doing lean things.
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned the holistic side of it, because a lot of companies, at least from what I've seen, they try to implement just small piece parts of it, like you mentioned, 5S and so forth. They aren't looking at it a holistic viewpoint at all. They don't take that culture piece into account. Have you seen the same thing?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I always tell people this whole lean thing, it's more about culture really than it is anything else. Because if you don't have the culture of like mutual trust and respect, and you have the commitment to change, lean's not going to stick, right? You're going to have a tremendous amount of backsliding, and it's just not going to get you where you want it to get you for as a business.
Yeah, it's so true. You see, I'm telling my viewers, I've talked about this over and over and over again. If culture's not right, it will never stick. We can teach all the lean tools you could ever desire, but it's never going to stick. Why do you think that is? Why is culture such a vital piece to lean being successful?
Well, I think everybody needs to be on the same page. And what happens, so often is you have, leaders might have their own perspective of where things should go, and people have their own perspective where things should go. And if they're different, you're going to have, some abrasion there. So it's really important that everybody has the common vision, right? The same vision of where they want to go, and they all understand the strategy the business has chosen to take them there. So but everybody's got to be on the same page. The senior leader, the senior leadership team, the entire leadership ranks, and then every one of the other employees in the company.
Yeah, it's so true. Oh my goodness. So do you think that that's the most important thing that a company or a business should focus on then, or is it something else?
Well, absolutely. It's culture, but primarily it needs to start at the top. If you don't have a leader, a senior leader, who's on board with everything and going to drive and is committed to it, then you have to go to the leadership ranks, because again, if you have some disagreement within the leadership ranks, you're not going to get the optimal solutions out of everything. So it's really important that culture is addressed top to bottom. Usually the employees will go where the leaders take them. So if the leaders are on the same page, they're more likely to follow. If the leaders are scattered all over the place, it's very difficult for the people to understand where we're really headed, and whose ship should I get on, because which ship is going to sail where we want to go.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I'm so glad you used that analogy because it's so true. If you've got multiple captains on a ship, the whole crew is going to be completely confused as to which direction. And so maybe we ram into an iceberg, like the Titanic, right? Maybe we ram into it instead of avoiding it altogether. We end up hitting those things rather than going around them together.
Right. And then you get the infighting amongst the leadership if they have a different path in mind. So very difficult. As we were fortunate, we had some leaders who were very well aligned.
Yeah.
One of the challenge I think is when you have a leadership change, which is part of every company's history. How do you maintain that constancy of purpose? How do you maintain the same direction, if you will, the same commitment? And we were very fortunate that the company we were in, I was there 16 years, and we had a 100% constant direction the entire 16 years. And I went to a different company and had the same leader, so I happened to have the same direction. So I was pretty comfortable with that whole situation.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. It's so true. We were so incredibly blessed at that aerospace company. Every single leader, no matter what level they were at, they could have been in the executive suite, they could have been in middle management, they could have been a line lead. Everyone spoke the same language. Everybody knew what we needed to accomplish in the direction that we were going in. They all knew it. So it was really easy to implement change aspects of it or to do Kaizen events because it was part of our culture. It's part of what we did. It's how we thought. That's one of the things that I've noticed as I've gone out to do some of my consulting work. Some of these teams are not aligned. So you may have, a executive CEO or a chief operations officer, if you will, that are so gung-ho about lean. This is the way that we need to do it. And then one other member, be it the chief financial officer or somebody else in the executive suite, doesn't agree. And it leaves the team kind of in chaos with when they do that. Do you have any advice for organizations that are like that are kind of like split? How do you get everybody on the same page?
Well, that's a really tough thing to achieve. I think we were very fortunate the company we were at achieved that. There have been a couple other companies where they weren't necessarily able to achieve that. So that can happen a multitude of ways, right? You get the person to change their mind.
Yeah.
Or they change their mind on their own. They could choose to leave the organization if they don't have a common, a path or vision of the company going forward. And I've been in situations where they actually have to change that leader because that leader was unwilling to get on board with where they wanted the company to go. So it's a difficult thing. It's part of the journey, the lean journey, as we called it, right? And and it's not, as long as it's not done in a mean way. That's just part of the evolution of a business.
Yeah, so it's a natural kind of thing. If they can't change, sometimes they're asked to leave, and that's okay. Sometimes that's necessary. We definitely saw that at the aerospace company we were at.
Right, and again, other aerospace companies I was at since then, similar things had to happen. Is you need to get everybody on the same page, and that's not always a pleasant thing. And there's a lot of choices that have to be made, both by the leader that's not agreeing, as well as the company that wants the leader to get on board. So just kind of have to wait and see how that goes and play by ear.
Yeah, for sure. Well, do you think that there's a difference between, a lean organization and a non-lean organization in terms of behavior?
Well, for sure. Because again, when everyone's on the same page in a lean organization, everybody knows the direction we're headed. They all are equipped with the tools to get there, and they are given in an environment. They have to be in an environment with mutual trust and respect, where they have they're allowed to spread their wings, to challenge the norms, to make change. So that's a very different situation. I always talk about the difference between doing lean and being lean, right? So a lot of companies will do lean. Oh yeah, we had an event last year. Okay, that's great. And then you have the companies where lean is the way they run events regularly to change the business on on a consistent basis and continual basis. So it's a much different attitude and much different level of commitment. And so a lean organization has that commitment level that they drive change. They allow people to spread their wings and make change within the boundaries of certain guidelines.
Yeah, for sure. Because there's always got to be boundaries, right? Even with our children, we have to give them boundaries in order to succeed. Chaos doesn't work, right? It's the same thing with an organization also. You've had experience with consultants and have also consulted a little bit. What is the difference between consulting and lean consulting? Is there a difference?
Oh, that's interesting. I think there is. I mean, when I think of consulting, I think of someone who's brought in with a specific skill set to attack a particular gap for the company. I think of something like you bring in a consultant for AS 9100 certification.
Yes,
someone to help you to get through that. Right, that's a consultant to me. A lean consultant, again, is working on the bigger culture of the business.
Yeah.
So you're working with the leaders to develop the leaders, helping them understand how lean works, how it applies, how to connect the dots between the lean activity and business performance. You're working with every individual in the company on training, right? On mentoring them, on coaching them. So it's quite a bit different. And you're also attacking the entire company for the waste you're trying to remove. You're in finance, you're in R&D, you're in quality. You're all over the company. You're not just in one specific area of the company. It's across the board. So I think it's a much broader, in my mind, much broader kind of approach to the company.
I'm so glad you brought that up, that it's in all aspects of the company. So a lot of folks have been kind of taken back because they ask me different things about, supply chain or operations and manufacturing, because they think that I live most of my life in operations, which is true. I would say probably 80% of what I do is in operations. But I have spent a significant amount of time in business development, in finance, in HR, supply chain especially. I spent a lot of time in supply chain, all doing lean stuff. And they think it's so unique because I'm not a finance person. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a lawyer, but I've worked with lawyers on lean projects. They're kind of blown away by the versatility that lean provides for our types of consultants. And you saw the tail end of the consultant that was brought in to kind of kickstart our lean journey at the aerospace company as well.
Right.
When did he realize that it was time to move on?
Well, it was an interesting kind of evolution. You talk about the shop floor, which is where we kind of always start, right? Lean.
Yeah, true.
And we did that company. Then we started to get into supply chain, right? Because that's where you spent a bit of time working on supply chain. Because as you fix the shop, you recognize the shop can do just fine if they had material, if they had tooling,
Yes.
if they had engineering, right? So you start looking upstream from the operations, and we got through operations, we got into supply chain. Then we started to go where I ended up spending like 4 or 5 years was in a new product introduction.
Yes.
The whole process from signing a contract all the way through having your first units on the production floor. That whole process, which is a huge value stream. And our consultant, he didn't have any experience there.
Oh,
so
interesting.
when we started to get into that part of the journey, we're recognizing we figured out the shop. We had a handle on supply chain, and we're headed in the right direction with that. The next chapter, if you will, was new product introduction with all the new programs coming online, and he didn't have any expertise there, so he didn't offer as much value as he had up to that point.
Interesting. So it's kind of like a mutual understanding that maybe we've progressed to the point where we appreciate everything that you've given us, but
Right.
now we're guiding the journey for ourselves, kind of thing.
I mean, all these years later, I still 100% believe if it hadn't been for that, our consultant, our sensei, we never would have gotten where we did.
Yeah.
We had a bit of a rough bedside manner, but that's what you need. You need someone who's going to kind of kick you in the rear end once in a while when you're not doing what you should be doing. And he was good at that. and we needed it, and it helped us get where we wanted to go. So he was the center point for us getting where we were. But at that point, he no longer had really much to offer us because we'd learned a great amount from him, and now we were growing beyond his area of expertise.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm glad you brought up his demeanor. So I've worked with a couple different consultants that were very similar. One of them, believe it or not, I actually said to him in one of my other, places that I worked, I said to them, I think I know a little bit more than you do. Can you please leave? You can go help finance or something, but I've got this kind of a thing. I had to do that at one point because his demeanor distracted the team more than it helped. I would agree at the very beginning of the lean journey at the aerospace company, it was absolutely necessary for his demeanor, the way that it was. Aerospace in those days was rough and tumble. You had to take your punches, if you will. Do you think it would work in today's environment, or does that kind of behavior?
Definitely not. I mean, it doesn't bother me because again, I grew up in that era, but the younger generation coming up today with the way the society's been, of late, I don't think it would be very well received. For sure. I mean, it just isn't an appropriate way to conduct business these days. Yeah.
Well, and I almost wonder if that kind of behavior, because of the way that it was, has kind of turned off some companies from the idea of a lean journey as well, because they're worried that their sensei will come in and behave that way, and that's not the culture that they want. Do you think that's true or no? Maybe I'm offbeat.
I think it'll depend on the company and their culture. I mean, some companies still have old school culture, right? And they might need someone a little rougher, right? A little rough around the edges to, kick a few tails once in a while. But if they're a more progressive, modern type company, probably wouldn't be a very good fit. So certainly that's part of the consulting is finding a right fit between the company and the consultant. Yes. Not every consultant can work well with every company, right? So I think that's a bit of something you got to work out too. Because I've worked with consultants before where they had a team of consultants and they brought in one person. You're like, this person isn't really working for us, and they bring someone else in. It's like, okay, this person's great. Let's get on with it, right? So a little bit of that fit going on too.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because there have been some instances, where I've gone into an organization thinking that this is going to be a great working relationship, and immediately, especially with the experience that you and I have been exposed to in facilitating this kind of journey, you can see immediately what the culture is like just by walking in the doors. You can tell, and there have been a couple of situations where I walked in and thought, I don't think I'm going to waste my time here, and I don't think they're going to waste their time on me. And that's kind of what happened at the beginning of the aerospace company, because the president that you ended up working with again at a couple other locations, he was desperate. He wanted it. But when he approached a certain individual that's very well known for lean, he essentially said, I don't think you guys can make the journey.
Right.
But I'm so glad that he sent us a consultant anyway.
Right. And that gentleman kept coming back to our company, right, to see how we were progressing, and in the long run of it all, gave us a lot of accolades for being a very prominent applier of lean in the aerospace sector. So
totally.
So that was interesting stories behind all that.
Totally. Oh my goodness. A great book is Culture, Change, and Continuous Improvement: The Story of an Aerospace Company. It's a good book to read all about that experience that we're referring to. So a plug for Martin Lodge and Colin Cramp.
What we call the revolution. That's what we call it, the revolution.
The revolution. And I'm glad that you also brought up before keeping the momentum as well, because when I joined the company, it had been on the continuous improvement journey for maybe 14 years by that point. And we were trying to discover how to keep the momentum going. People were starting to become complacent a little bit.
And I remember having many conversations with the CI leaders of the company on that very thing. They kept saying, how do we maintain the constancy of purpose? When we started, they had the burning platform, right? The company was bankrupt, right? And then it was fix it quick or you guys are gone. So there was a pretty good burning platform. But then after about 10 years, when we had, resurrected the company, if you will, and now they were bordering on world class. And then the challenge was, how do we maintain the constancy of purpose? How do we keep the momentum? And then they did, right? And they worked that through with some of the various tools like enterprise excellence and other ways to constantly raise the bar on the business and on people to up the bar and make the challenge.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we started to kind of see the lean influence in everything that we did. It wasn't just a shop floor initiative anymore. That's where enterprise excellence came into play. We were held accountable through progress to the continuous improvement journey every year through enterprise excellence in our matrices, which to me was revolutionary in and of itself. Not many companies have something like that, which was pretty incredible. Do you see a lean influence in everything that you do, maybe even personally too?
Of course, it's see lean in everything. It's some people say it's a sickness, right? Everywhere you go, oh man, look at that! Look at all the waste in that process. Oh, look at the way they're doing that. Why don't they move that over here and this over there? And then it's kind of the way we think, right? And people like you and I, which some might say is a sickness, but everything in life is a process or a series of processes, and every process can be improved. And so I always talk about, lean in my mind is the quest for the perfect process.
Yes.
So any process around you has the opportunity to remove waste to make it quote unquote perfect or close the gap towards perfection. And so that's why it's just a never ending gift, if you will, of opportunity to make things better.
Totally. Have you seen it at home? Have you coached your kids in a lean way at home? Have they even noticed it?
Well, that's, there's an interesting story behind that. The sensei we talked about previously, when I first got into lean, he would say, be careful about taking this lean stuff home. He goes, it can cause some real grief. It doesn't always work at home because the dynamics in a marriage are way different than the dynamics in a business environment.
So true.
So I have managed to deal with my frustration over my 37 years of marriage. We're not on the same page with this stuff, but that's okay.
Yeah, I understand. My husband's an engineer, and he is not the lean side of engineering. So that can get quite frustrating. I've learned how to let it go.
Right.
Yeah, but there's certain things that it's really helped with. The 07 wildfires, for instance, I talk about this in some of my seminars, but my parents learned that we were regularly evacuated from forest fires up in the San Bernardino Mountains. And the first time we evacuated, it took over an hour to evacuate the house. Well, my mom put in some visual controls in the house. So when we got the call to evacuate, she went from an hour to 15 minutes to evacuate the house. So it does work.
It could be important.
Yeah. It does work from that standpoint, I guess.
Right.
And I've used it in my garage and stuff from that situation. But with the cultural aspect of lean, of course, it becomes part of who we are. So I would imagine some of that, fell into the familial pot, if you will.
Yeah, my son is now working in the same company I am, and he's as an engineer, and he's just trying to get exposed to lean. And he's like, oh, okay, this is kind of interesting stuff. And, he's getting intrigued by it. I wouldn't say he's fully bought in yet, but he's starting to, get exposure and starting to understand how it works and how it can make things better. So that's been fun.
That's awesome. He's got no better, influencer than his own father. That's brilliant.
But kids don't always think that way, right?
True.
That is my dad. And it's like, okay, great.
Oh my goodness, that's awesome. Do you think that lean, when we talk about culture change, there's lots of different ways that we can do culture change, right? We can implement Myers-Briggs, we can do different behavioral type, cognitive behavioral type evaluations and stuff like that, and build teams and do those kinds of things. But in your opinion, is culture change better with lean or a necessary thing with lean?
I think it's a necessary thing with lean. The previous company we worked at, we were lucky in the respect that the leadership had already been going through a lot of emotional intelligence training and some other soft skills training that put them in a position to be able to deal with change and the emotion of change that people have to deal with. So they were, thinking back, I've always said that was a very lucky situation that enabled lean to more quickly take hold. I've also been in companies where they didn't have I call it soft skills and leadership maturity in place. And it took a lot longer to get the lean train rolling because you had to give those leaders some skills training to enable them to lead people through the turbulent waters of change because of all the emotion and anxiety and frustration that can happen during that whole process.
Wow, I hadn't thought about that before. That it does take longer if they don't have some of those soft skills, like you mentioned. Right. But it's true. I think one of the reasons why we were so successful is because there was a people philosophy in place before we embarked on a lean journey.
Absolutely. I credit that with the reason it took off so quickly. Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, and it also makes sense for where it took off the most as well. Some of our sites that were, I guess, more advanced than other sites were ones that were more people focused and that people philosophy was alive and well there also. Right.
Yeah, more mutual trust and respect in their local culture. So absolutely.
Yeah. One of the things that I teach and coach and train, I've been certified in something called Real Colors. It's similar to Myers-Briggs, but I always put my teams, whoever I'm coaching, whoever I go in to consult with, I always put them through that first so that they learn a little bit more about themselves and their behavior and how they interact with others before I start coaching them on the tools and how to use the tools. It's kind of like a infusion of that mutual trust and respect, adult to adult behavior kind of thing before we get going on a lean journey. I try it a little bit.
I'm a big advocate of emotional intelligence, and I think that's one of the skills everybody, especially leaders, should spend some time with because it'll help them do a better job of that mutual trust and respect and communicating with people and knowing how to approach people given their particular personality and characteristics.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then lean can kind of come in and that lean thinking can kind of continue that momentum forward, right? By achieving different things, right? Giving them different goals, I guess, to go forward with.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Do you think it should be that lean thinking should be a motivator for a business system then?
Well, absolutely. I mean, when the place we worked at, they had something in all of in HR, when they looked at promoting people or hiring people, the first characteristic on the interview process, because I was on many interview panels, the first characteristic they were looking for was lean maturity. So if you're going to promote internally, you had to have been a lean, not a zealot necessarily, but someone who participated in lean and understood it and could lead a team using the lean tools. And then when we were hiring, obviously those were one of those buzzwords you wanted to see on somebody's resume or during discussion, talk about lean or lean sigma or some continuous improvement or something along those lines. So certainly it becomes a part of the fabric you want to have in your all employees, but especially in leadership.
Yeah, I remember at one point in time, my boss at the time in supply chain, he's retiring soon, actually. He let me know that I was the first person external to the company to be hired for a lean role. They had never done that before. That it was me. I was the first one, and which is kind of cool if you think about it, because that means promoting from within was a big deal. So if folks could do those tools and be promoted into that kind of role, they would choose them first. So it was, promote from within kind of mindset also, which is kind of cool.
You talk about the constancy of purpose and having the vision. Obviously, if someone's been in the company, especially for any period of time, they'll be pretty well aware of what the vision is and what the direction of the company is. Yeah. So and the culture. So they'd be makes them have a little advantage over somebody coming from outside, because they're gonna be able to fit in much more quickly and know the right flight level of change and the speed of change and all those sorts of things. So certainly there's a big advantage to that, and you get much more commitment from those people, because they obviously was given an opportunity to grow their careers in within the same company. So there's a lot of mutual benefit to that internal promotion practice.
Yeah, totally. Well, and one of the other things that we would do all the time as well is being promoted into a lean role was a promotion. It was not a demotion. It was not we're trying to put you in a place that, we can quietly get rid of you. It wasn't that kind of role. We tried desperately to hold on to people. We did not fire willy-nilly, if you will. We always tried to train and coach and help support. And I think that was part of the lean influence as well.
Well, that was an important element of the lean culture, is as you freed up the resources, you had to redeploy them somewhere.
Yeah.
The mistake people make often in lean is they reduce the waste, they free up resources, they go, hey, we can just let go 20 people.
Right.
No. As soon as you do that, the whole lean journey is done, right? Because people aren't going to create their own demise, and nor is that the right approach for the business. I always tell people, lean is a business growth strategy, right?
Yes.
It's removing waste. You're removing waste to free up resources to do more sales.
Yes.
So I tell people the story about the sales per employee was one of the metrics we measured at that first company. And when we started the journey, I won't tell you what the numbers were, but the number when they started was, we'll say 100. When the journey was 10 years down the road, it was 500. They had improved sales per employee by 5 times.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was what you do with lean. And that's what you have to sell to senior leadership is freeing up resources so that you can reuse those resources to make more sales. And at better margins too, right? Because now you're doing things more efficiently. Your margins are going to be higher, or your prices are going to be lower, so you can capture more market share. So it's a growth machine that once you get the train rolling, it just feeds itself.
So how if you come across somebody that may not understand that it's a growth model, how do you convince them, or how do you talk them into understanding that it's a growth model versus they're just trying to get rid of me, or this is a flavor of the week kind of thing? How do you coach through that?
Well, I guess more than coaching through it, the company's got to demonstrate action in that respect. So that what has to happen is when they do free up a resource, you don't lay them off, right? You find them something else to do. The other side of that is that the company needs to have a sales and marketing strategy to get ahead of that, right? Because you have to go make some sales before you can do the work and need the people, right? So you've got to go out and generate some more sales to be able to put those people to work. And so sometimes you have to actually carry those people as overhead, which sounds horrible, because you don't want to lay them off because they're good people and they're working hard for you. And if you lay them off, your lean journey is done. So you need to hold on to them, get more sales, use the people to fill the gap of those new sales. And then again, then the machine starts becoming self-perpetuating in that respect. But you got to get the sales and marketing on board as well, which is why this is holistic. Because if they're not on board generating those sales up front, you're going to have all these people standing around with nothing to do.
Twiddling their thumbs, if you will.
And you can only do that for so long before you're going to get pressures to release that burden, and that's not what you want to do. You want to generate more sales, not reduce the headcount.
Yeah. Well, and from a consulting perspective, when you discover that your client is unwilling to change, what would you suggest to the consultant that they should do?
I think you have to have a heart-to-heart with your customer, right? You need to reinforce what you're there for and what the whole goal of lean is all about. And if it appears that they're not aligned with that vision, then there might be time for us to part ways. I mean,
which happens.
You kind of owe them a little bit of respect there, that you're not there just to take their money and fly away. You want to give them value for what they're paying you. And so if they're not in a position to be able to realize that value, then it's not really in their best interest to be spending the money on the consulting. So I hate to say that, but I mean, sometimes you just might say, I appreciate your position. I wish it was different, but if we're not on the same page in the line, we just might have to part ways and do something different.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's hard for some consultants to get their heads wrapped around, especially if they're starving for work. Sometimes consultants will stay longer than they should. Also, I had a student because I was adjunct professoring. I guess I'll turn that into a verb. I was adjunct teaching at one of the local universities here. And I was teaching juniors and seniors in systems engineering. And one of them approached me and said, "Hey, I'm graduating in a couple weeks and I want to be a consultant. How do I become a consultant?" And I was like, "Wait a minute, time out. Are you wanting to be a consultant now?" No. And he said, "Yes, when I graduate, I'm going to start my own consultancy business." And I had to stop him and say, "No offense, but you know nothing. Right. Yeah. Please go into industry and get some experience and then build what your consultancy is going to look like." I think both of us have worked with consultants in the past where it's like, oh my gosh, we're just throwing money at this person and they're not really helping us much. But me, when I saw it happen, I was a lower level person. And so it was hard for me to communicate that up above, but I probably should have, but I didn't. So if you see that happening in your facility and you may be a lower level person, what advice would you give that individual that sees it? Should they say something?
I think they should. I mean, obviously you need to go about that conversation appropriately because it can be a very delicate conversation. But I think you could ask some questions, maybe some respectful challenging, to seek to understand, and in the process of understanding, it might expose a reality that maybe the other person wasn't aware of. Yeah. It's always an opportunity for a little improvement. In some ways, it's a different kind of improvement, right? It's just a little bit of another kind of waste to avoid. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and, as a consultant, you've got to know when to stay and when to go as well. So one of my clients is a little more advanced than my other clients in terms of their lean journey. There's still work that needs to be done, but I know that, give them, 3 to 5 more years, they may not need me anymore. And as a consultant, that can be scary.
because there goes your opportunity for, being involved in industry, and involved in the business. You probably created some really great relationships there and stuff. It could be sad to say goodbye. But as a consultant, you've got to learn to know when it's time to step back also.
For sure. And again, as you do consulting, you make a lot of networking going on, and you'll find that somebody that worked at one of the companies you was consulted for might need your services somewhere else if they go. So that network kind of builds out there. And but it's interesting you mentioned, might need you only 3 to 5 years more. When you say that, people would gasp. Only 3 to 5 years. I mean, we know how long the journey was at the first place. I was there 16 years, right? And they were doing it before I got there, and they're doing it after I left. So people don't realize how long the journey is, and what kind of commitment it takes to really realize the potential that Lean has to offer. If you look at across the breadth of the business, starting in manufacturing and working way upstream from there into all the other tentacles around the company, that the opportunity truly exists.
Yeah, it's so true. The length of time, of course, depends on the experience of the individuals on the site. Also, there at the aerospace company, it was massive. So we were still, focused with individuals who had never been exposed to a Lean tool before in their life, right? Had that experience going on, as well as these super advanced. Most of them are consultants now because they've retired and they've gone on to consult also. So we had the big gap between people. In smaller facilities, the process or the journey may go a little bit faster for them, but it's only because of number. It's not difficulty, I guess, if you will. There are some folks, though, some businesses that implement a Lean journey or something that looks like that because some auditor told them that they needed it, or their customer is demanding it from them. Right. And so the commitment isn't really there. What do you think the difference was in commitment at the different locations that you've worked at, where Lean was successful and it wasn't successful? What was different?
Well, comes down back to the leader, right? To me, it starts and ends with the leader and the leadership team. If that constancy of purpose, they have that vision, and they can talk it, and they're legitimate. I mean, that was one of the things we had in that aerospace company was our leaders. They gave the training.
Yes, right? So they did.
When your senior leader stands up in front of the hourly employees and the middle managers, and they deliver the Lean training, people are like, holy smokes. Okay, this guy knows what he's doing. He knows what he's talking about. He understands this, and if he's driving it, it's got to be something worthy of at least giving a chance to. So I think that was extremely powerful to have your leaders be part of the teaching learning process of the business, and that certainly set the tone for the employees, because we were training suppliers and customers too, right? So we were doing our training. We got suppliers and customers in, and the customers would come in. They're just blown away that you had a VP or a senior director standing up there giving a standard work training module, and they knew what they were talking about, and they could talk about experiences doing it, and that was there's just no real better way to do it than to have your leaders be part of the people delivering the training and the coaching for the employees. So that's how strong that culture was. And, that's why you couldn't beat it.
Yeah, so true. I remember every time the director of IT would come in to teach bias for action, the response in the team was like, this is the IT VP? Really? Yeah. Really? She's giving bias for action? That's amazing. Because usually IT is kind of like in their own world, right? And seeing somebody in that role come in and say, no, we all need a bias for action towards continuous improvement. It was amazing. You're absolutely right. It was like, wow, this person's committed to it. But what advice do you give, a leadership team that's trying to promote change, but they're just not getting the buy-in?
Well, I think they have to get the right amount or right level of training and experience so that they can truly understand it. So I've always talked about, the change process goes from awareness, understanding, commitment, and habit. And I always tell people you can't expect somebody to be committed to it if they don't understand it.
Yes.
So it's not, you can't just jump over that fence, right? You can't just jump over it. You've got to actually work your way through it. So it's really important that the part of the leadership plan is to give the right amount of training as well as application experience so that they understand how the tools truly work and that they do work, so that they can now lead the charge with some knowledge about process and some recognition and experience that it does work. Yeah, that comes back to the leaders given the training. What better way to demonstrate the vision and the commitment of a leadership team than having them come up there and actually give that training. So you got to give those leaders the experience so they can get there, because they don't get there automatically, right? They've got to get there through involvement. So again, another thing we had in like our performance objectives, right, was for people to be involved and lead and co-lead events, so that they were continually sharpening their lean skills. So again, they can lead with experience and knowledge and understanding, not just because they read a book about lean and now they get it.
Yeah, it's so true. I've run into people like that as well. Hey, I read this really nifty thing in this book. I think we should do it. And it's like, do you realize that requires this, and this, and you don't have any of those three things in place yet? Let's talk about these first before we jump into high junka boards, if you will. We're not going to be doing that without some basic understanding of time management and standard work, frankly. Have you ever been in a situation where somebody has read a concept from a book and has implemented it and it epically failed, and so now they've just written the whole process off? I don't want to do it.
I run into people all the time that they what do you do? I'm continuous improvement. I do lean. They go, oh, we tried lean. We tried lean once. We tried lean once. Oh, that's great. They said somebody went to a seminar, they read a book, and they said, yeah, this is good stuff, and they had no clue how to really effectively run a continuous improvement activity, and they failed, and then immediately the whole thing was just junk, right? Okay, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. Well, we obviously, you and I know otherwise. And again, it's about having the right level of training and development at the beginning of the journey to have a solid start. And that's where the consultant comes in, I think. The consultant is the jump starter to bring the experience and the knowledge to the company or to the customer, to give them the wisdom that you've learned over time. And how to apply the tools and when to apply them and at what level and so on and so on, that will get it off on the right foot, so they start to develop some internal momentum, because it'll kill your momentum quickly if you have a failure right out of the gate. So I think that's where the key role of the consultant is, to get the company started in the right direction and getting them to a level of maturity that they can maybe go on their own. But to your point, we're talking years. I tell people if you don't give it 3 to 5 years of commitment, then you haven't really given it a chance.
Yes, amen. Everybody wants quick results these days, right? So they may try 5S for 2 months, 2 or 3 months, and then, nobody's doing the assessment, so it epically failed.
Yeah.
You only gave it 2 months.
Yeah, and one of the bigger challenges with that is not so much if the leader, the CEO, it's if you have stockholders, right? Yes. And boards of directors and people that have financial expectations. They've got to be on board with a long-term vision as well. So that's a tough one. I think a lot of companies are hamstrung with is the board of directors. They've got to deliver certain profit returns to their stakeholders, and if they're not getting that return, there's pressure to cut the cord and move on.
Totally. Well, and they probably have the least amount of patience. So the employees are going to give it a good college try, if you will. They're going to try it over and over and over again, somewhat because they're told to do it, and somewhat because they're just willing to do it. But then the senior leaders are feeling the pressure from the board, and the board is telling them, hey, I didn't see benefits and results last month. We're actually losing money. Because you and I both know in the beginning of a lean journey, it does cost money.
Just about to say that I've driven that. I draw that diagram for people all the time, because where I'm at now, we're at the beginning of that journey. And I keep saying there's that line of making money, and we are below the line for a couple of years. And then you start gaining momentum and you break even 3, 4, 5 years down the road. And then you start doing really well after that. But having the patience and the commitment, recognizing that's the business model. It's a business model, right? It's a long-term business model strategy. So if you don't embrace that and drive that, it's going to fail. And that's where I think a lot of people do that, is because they do not have that long-term vision or the flexibility from their stakeholders to allow them to do that.
Oh, it's so true. It's so true. Yeah, I remember talking to one of my my board members at one of the places that I worked. He was on board, but the others were not so sure. So he was willing to give me some time to try to work through some things, but there's only so much you can do in a couple months. And so I tried showing the same model that you talked about, that in the beginning, it does cost. We do see a cost come into play, but then in the end, it takes over and we end up, achieving more. But I'm not sure he fully bought into it, because he wanted those results today. And so all of our Kaizen events started to be evaluated on whether or not we would be getting cost benefits out of it. And so we weren't doing basic Kaizen events because they were the right thing to do. We were doing other events because we knew that we would get cost reduction from it, which is kind of a dangerous thing to do as well. That's one of the benefits that I always liked about the aerospace company, is that we didn't really look at money too much when we were doing a Kaizen event. It was, we're doing this because it's the right thing to do.
It's like building a house. You've got to build the foundation before you can put the beautiful flowers on, in the planter. So we knew you had to go fix all those underlying things that were contributing to the poor performance before you could go do the really cool, fun, beautiful, flowery stuff. And I think that was a really smart business decision. They were very, and the consultant helped us with that, right? He held our feet to the fire. He made sure that we were doing the right foundational things first, and we'll get to the other things later. And I think also part of this is the skill of the senior leader to hold off the board of directors, right? Yes. How does someone has to be able to convince the board of directors that the strategy that they're on is going to be a long-term good strategy for the stakeholders too. So so having a real savvy, a real good, CEO, if you will, that can influence the board of directors like that is really important. So again, I think kind of perfect storm for us was we kind of had all those elements at the same time, and so we were able to see the tremendous benefit the company saw from that. And it's not always that way.
Yeah, it isn't. You're absolutely right.
That's why I followed that CEO to the next company I went to.
Smart man.
I knew he had the vision. He knew what it was worth, and he was going to stay the course. And you had at least had a shot at it. And so went there, and we were seeing the same thing happen. So it was really good.
Yeah, it's so true. Well, speaking of, was he one of those that influenced your leadership style? And would you consider him your lean sensei, or was the consultant your lean sensei, or somebody else? Maybe it was somebody else.
Well, initially, the consultant sensei was kind of the teacher, if you will, the driver. As I got to a certain level of experience, and my direction went, like I said, I went into doing new product introduction, which was a new area for everybody because my background in engineering and program management. I aligned more with the senior leader that's been my mentor for the last 20 years now, because we were kind of plowing that ground together because no one had ever done it, including our sensei, right? Which is why he was no longer our sensei. And so we spent a lot of time, mulling over where we were headed and how to get there, and in uncharted territory because nobody had ever really done that. So that was a lot of fun stuff. But yeah,
oh man, yeah,
that individual had the drive, as you know, and had the vision and had seen the success, and people around him knew that were part of that success. So they knew anything we were going to try had a pretty good shot at being successful because it was a group of people that wasn't in the business of failing. Oh
yeah. Well, and I remember one interaction that I had with him because he was always around. He was not an absentee president / CEO. He was always around. And if you had a question, you could approach him. Unfortunately, meetings, of course, took over. And so his time was somewhat limited, but he always was around. I remember being on a Kaizen event with him in particular. And I was a young engineer. And on this Kaizen event, I was doing what I thought I was supposed to do, which was capture everything all the observations that were on the wall for this big Kaizen event that we were doing. And so I'm sitting in a corner, capturing all this stuff. And I remember him walking up to me and tapping me on the shoulder saying, "What are you doing?" and I told him what I was doing. And he said, "That's lovely. You don't need to be doing that. I need your brain." And to me, I was like, oh, it was the first time that I was like, wow, he knows who I am. And he put me on this Kaizen event, not because I needed to capture the walls or to do some, admin type task. He brought me in here because he wanted my opinion. Right. That was life-changing for me. And leaders can do that for their staff. We regularly had leadership weeks. You were just talking about having a leadership week. Was it last week or the week before?
2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Incredible concept. So what is a leadership week for the viewers?
So that's when you have take a facility maybe that doesn't have to be in dire straits, but maybe needs some help, and you bring in leadership from all around the business. So in my case 2 weeks ago, we had a leadership week. We had participants from 13 different sites came to our facility here and participated. These were site leaders and directors and managers and some frontline folks as well. But you bring this we brought 29 people from 13 different sites to come help us, and they would say they got stuff done in 1 week that would have taken the local team a year to do.
Wow!
It's just the sheer volume of work and with all the extra resource, what you could do. And some of the stuff was as simple as we were 5S'ing our maintenance area. We were just taking all of the junk out of the maintenance area, sorting through all of it, throwing away all the stuff we didn't need any longer, and then reorganizing and putting it back into the maintenance area. That was one of the events, and we had site leaders and managers and directors doing this, and they loved it. But then again, for the local people, especially the hourly folks, what kind of message does that send?
Yeah, huge.
Right? This company flew all these people in. They're in there cleaning up our junk, and that's important for the business. Wow. So it sends a pretty strong message, and it really is a real indication of the commitment of the senior leadership totally. to the journey.
Totally. Well, and we talked about the journey a lot as well at that aerospace company as well, so that the hourly employee could say the same language that the leader was saying, because we were doing the same things.
Right.
And
side by side.
Show that. Yeah.
Yep. And we always say right during the event, your badges stayed at the door.
Yes.
We didn't care what your badge said on it or what your title was. It didn't matter, because you were out there to go support that team, whatever team you were on, and you could be scraping tape off the floor, or you could be doing process mapping, or you could be doing time observations, but it didn't matter where you came from or who you were put on a team, sometimes with the explicit purpose of putting you in that position to demonstrate to everybody, the commitment that leadership has to the whole journey.
Yeah.
Very, very powerful visual.
Yeah, because I think in the very beginning stages, at one of the very first leadership event weeks, if I remember right, our president and CEO was painting the floor. Yeah.
I remember the picture. I know the name, and I remember the picture. So
yeah, that sends a huge message. It also is a good propaganda for the board too. Hey, this is where our leadership team is at. We're committed to this, and you've got to give us some time to see some real results.
Yeah. So again, that's part of the strength of the leader, and the behavior of the leader is an indication of the success of the journey. So if they're including themselves in the journey, if they're out there scraping tape off the floor or painting lines or whatever, that sends a pretty strong message to people. So
yeah, it does.
It's very powerful.
Yeah. I'm so glad. I'm so glad that you've mentioned all those things, because it takes me to one of my clients. We were working on something that is going to impact people's lives directly, is what we were working on this particular Kaizen event. And I remember one morning, the president coming in and actually shedding tears, saying, I want you guys to understand this is the way. This is the only way that we're going to go forward. And I need the commitment because this directly impacts people's lives. And it was an extremely powerful experience for all of the middle management, because it was mostly middle management, for them being in the room, because it showed them, wow, okay, he's not viewing himself as being higher than us and dictating to us that this is what we have to do. It was, this is going to change lives. And that's what I'm all about, is changing lives. And how we're going to do it is by following this methodology and process.
Right.
Is there anyone in your life that has helped shape your leadership style? There may be more than just one. And were they a lean person or were they not?
Well, of course, we talked about my mentor. He's probably the primary person that's shaped who I am professionally, anyways. Yeah, I mean, we find people that we look up to and that we respect, and all of our, as we travel around the business and the world, you run into people that have an emotional impact on you. And so there's certainly quite a number of people that you pick little characteristics of theirs that you find is you respect. And you want to embed in your personality. So yeah, certainly that mentor. And there's a couple other folks. We talked about the gal who was the head of IT. She was someone who had a real big impact on me because of her style. I just really I've always had great respect for her and the way she conducted herself. Especially a professional woman in a quote unquote a man's world. Back in the day, there's still quite a bit of that, and she conducted herself very professionally and very effectively. And I just had great respect for her and how she conducted herself. And again, there's so many leaders that have that emotional intelligence that puts them in such a behavior that is inviting and nurturing and supporting on this journey. And so that those sorts of people can have a profound effect on not just people like me, but everybody. And so there's quite a number of folks that have those various characteristics that are going to mold us as we go forward.
Yeah, for sure. I found the same thing. You're one of those individuals for me. So thank you. Thank you very much. I learned a lot from Sam because that was my second job out of college. And I was learning how to navigate within an organization of that size. And how to handle myself professionally as an engineer, to promote myself as an engineer, as well as a lean professional. And Sam was critical for my development in that. And I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for the kind words. Appreciate it. A lot of experiences and fun back in the day, for sure.
Oh my goodness, yes. We had a lot of fun. Sam and I did a lot of training together, So we were often facilitators together on all the trainings, as well as running those leadership weeks. We spent a lot of time doing those things too. And then going into your program development and product, lean product development stuff, we ended up adapting that for work transfer and all sorts of things we started doing. So we did a lot of that stuff together too. Really, really fun, creative, most lean, transformative kind of things that I've seen in my career to date, which is really, really cool.
That was some fun times for sure.
Yeah, a lot of fun times. Well, Sam, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for all of your involvement and your advice. Is there anything that we missed or anything that you would like to share that we haven't spoken about?
I think we talked about a lot of it. The biggest thing is recognize the difference between doing lean and being lean. Because as a consultant, you want to be cautious of that because it's all about the culture. So the culture is that barometer of whether you're doing lean or being lean. So work on the culture. The culture is the key, and the lean will come because the lean's not really that hard. You just say it's simple but not easy. Yes. It's not easy because it takes the commitment, right? So that's really where the hard part of lean comes from. Doing the lean itself is really not that difficult, but the cultural part and the leadership part is very, very difficult, and that's where, in my mind, a lot of the consultants' efforts need to be put certainly at the beginning of the journey. To make sure that there's vision, there's alignment, there's commitment, and then it's going to end up in success.
Totally. Oh, I'm so glad that you said that. Exactly. The culture is the foundation to every business being successful, period. If you want to be successful as a lean organization, culture is vital. I'm glad that you mentioned that it's the barometer because it definitely is. That's why consultants and facilitators can walk into an organization and know whether or not it's healthy or not instantly because we can see it. The culture speaks for itself. Definitely.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Michelle. I really appreciate it. It's been great catching up with you again.
Likewise. Thank you so much. This has been awesome. I think your pearls of wisdom are going to continue to support me in my development as well as a leader. As a lean leader, I should say, and as a consultant for sure. Thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule because I know you're a very busy individual.
You too. So thank you very much. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.